to another edition of the Zoom with Our Feet podcast, the pod about creative production. With me, your host, TMac, professional photographer, videographer, and teacher. On this episode of the ZoomPod, Jeff Alberini, a fellow Kent State media and education grad, joins me to share invaluable insights about media education, the ins and outs of passion projects, and the best advice for aspiring creators. Our guest speaker is in the photo lab. Let's talk to a pro. Jeff Alberini, welcome to the Zoom with Our Feet podcast. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am great. It's great to have you. This is the All Kent State episode of the Zoom Pod. Both Jeff and I have undergrads from Kent State, and also, we'll talk about it later, MEDs, same cohort.
Yeah.
I went all educational on you for that one. We will talk about our educational experiences in a minute, but I'm really interested in your media experience, media production specifically experience, and how you've brought that to the industry, back again. So let's get into it. How did your production journey start?
My production journey started when I stumbled upon a class during my undergrad at Kent State University. I did not go to college in the beginning for this. It sickens me to have to say I thought I was going to be an accountant. That's what I went for, and I took a few classes, and I'm like, I'm good at numbers, but this is really not my thing. But I gotta give a lot of credit to my dad. My dad's a real movie buff. He watches a lot of films. And when I was growing up, there were no parental ratings or anything, so I grew up watching everything right along with my dad, whether it was TV or films. And then once I realized that Kent State actually had a major for video production, and I took my first class, I was hooked. But from there, it just kind of, I started working at teleproductions, and I also worked at TV2. TV2 is a student-run organization. They do newscasts and other shows. I started out as a camera op, but yeah, I did news directing and technical directing. That was kind of my jam. And then I got into some PBS shows with teleproductions, and I did Newsnight Akron for several years. So imagine being in college and spending, your first 3 hours of a Friday night filming a TV show in a studio in the first floor of Music and Speech. So,
and the experience and all of that. That's I actually worked in, before Black Squirrel Radio. There was WKSU. I did a night shift. I used to dedicate records to the desk, young lady at the desk at Prentice Hall, who's now upstairs.
Nice.
Yeah. This is going to date you, so I'm going to ask it.
That's okay.
First video camera that was yours, and what did you use to shoot with it?
Oh, geez. The first video camera, professional one that I bought was right when I graduated. It was a Canon GL2, and it shot on mini DV tape. Tape, yeah. So I learned linear editing, tape to tape, while at TV2. That's how we cut all of our stuff for news. I remember my first short film I ever did at Kent State. They had a product called a video toaster, and the video toaster was extra transitions beyond a cut a dissolve, or your standard wipe. So that's where all like the DVE effects were in this thing called a video toaster.
The toaster.
Yeah,
Dude.
yeah, that dates me too.
Well, I'm going to go a little further back. I learned on BVU 800 3/4 inch decks. And for the young bloods out there, editing was copying from the source to a record. That's
Hmm.
it. You told it when and what channels, and you hit a button and it went back 5 seconds, pre roll, went up to that point, and then started copying.
Yeah, that's it.
That
You
was
know,
editing.
that was it. Um, I don't think I took my first nonlinear editing class until I was a junior. I think I learned on like Adobe Premiere. I think it was like four. It was really old. And then my last year, Final Cut Pro came out. So I'd already taken my nonlinear editing class. And as a lifelong learner, even at that age, I taught myself that program. And then I was a Final Cut editor for probably a decade before I jumped back to Premiere. And that's what I'm still cutting with now.
Final Cut 7.
Final Cut 7. That when I say I'm a Final Cut editor, that's what I meant.
Yeah,
Once it went to X, it was like I can't do this. This
yeah.
is too much like a novice editing system. Didn't
I'm
have all the things that I was used to.
iMovie on steroids.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah, exactly.
Who did you, I mean, you've done it all, but when you first started, was it camera that really, that experience was, were you really focusing on camera or were you
Um,
anything and everything?
you know, when I first started, you had to work your way up to camera. Okay, so camera ops normally were reserved as upperclassmen spots. So I started as a floor director, or I ran audio, or I ran graphics. So the way Kent State kind of had it set up is probably how my professional career kind of developed. Is I was learning all these different crew positions on live productions, and then once I got my shot, I was able to do what I wanted to do, which ultimately was be a technical director. um, but that's why I did both. TV2 allowed me to direct and TD, where for the PBS shows, the highest you could go was camera. And camera one for Newsnight Akron, that was the cool camera because you got to do the push at the opening shot. And where everybody else, it was like two shots and solos. So, at least you got to do some camera movements from camera one.
Little
Yeah.
easy zoom
Easy
in on.
zoom. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's a skill for sure. For sure.
yeah.
As you know.
Specific to camera, how did you, and lifelong learner, did you teach yourself the basics of camera operation, exposure, iris, framing and comp? How were you? Was there classes then,
Yeah,
or
there
were
were
you?
classes then. Yeah. So this was like 99, early 2000. I graduated with my bachelor's in 2002. So my first class was intro to video production. You'd check out one of the ENG cameras that they had. And although they kind of went over the basics, you've got to imagine a professor standing in front of the room with one camera and some projected slides behind them of some buttons. So if you really wanted to learn it, you had to teach yourself, because there weren't online manuals like there are today. We didn't have that many resources. So it was, like roll your sleeves up and go and film as much as you could. You would do it for all your class projects, but at the same time, you were trying to film a lot on your own time. And I was lucky enough that I was working a part-time job while I was going to school at Circuit City. Also dates me. This is an electronics store back in the day.
Dead.
Um, yeah, I was able to buy a smaller, like, consumer video camera that I could just film, and that was mainly just for shot composition. Because to me, when you're learning how to use a camera, it doesn't matter what brand the camera is, it doesn't matter what kind of lens is on it. If you can't compose a shot, um, it's really hard to get a job in this industry. So I always laugh whenever I've interviewed for video positions throughout the year. People would ask me, like, "Well, what cameras do you use?" And my answer is very similar to what I just said. Doesn't matter what camera I use. I know how to frame a shot using the rule of thirds. And based on that knowledge, I can figure out where all the buttons are probably in about 10 minutes from there. So,
It's the technique, not
yeah,
the technology.
that's right. That's right. The technology can advance as much as, and it's amazing technology now compared to when I started, but the technique is still the same. You're still, I guess that one advantage these, I would say, students nowadays has is they can actually turn a button on that puts the roll of thirds on their EVF or like flip out LCD.
Yeah.
When we were learning, it was in your head. And I think that's the advantage. I was constantly seeing that, for lack of a better term, tic tac toe board over top of everyone's face. That way I knew, okay, if I'm filming an interview and my interviewer's on this side, I want to make sure I leave the lead room on this side. Or if, I'm doing like a moving shot, I get to decide as the camera operator, do I leave the lead room or do I come around behind them and follow them? But while you're doing it, it's if you can't compose a still image, it's very hard to compose something moving.
All right. So, 2002,
Mm-hmm.
newly minted BA in electronic media production. Now what?
Mm-hmm. Oh boy. Well, I did an internship at a production house in Medina. I don't think they're in business anymore. It was Creative Technology. They had a really good DP there. Like, the cinematographer, I learned a lot from. Um, I also learned how to a lot of lighting techniques from them. I remember my first day, even interning there. They were like, "Yeah, go out to the truck and get a couple of C stands, get some, some boom arms, a couple of knuckles." They start naming all this random stuff, and you're like, "What?" Like, so just learning all the terminology was key. But when I graduated, I freelanced with them, and I did that for a couple of years. While I was doing that, I was also trying to do my own thing with one of my best friends in town. We were taking any video gig that we could get, whether it's wedding videography. I dipped my toes in that. Commercials, uh, public service announcements for nonprofits. We tried a lot of things, and like I said, several years did go by. I also um, tried my hand at filmmaking. As somebody that watched film as much as I did when I was growing up, I wrote a short script and I got all my friends together and we filmed it over several weeks. I would never show anybody that now, and anybody who has a copy of it, I hope it doesn't work because it was really bad. But I'll be honest, that's how you learn. You can't learn how to do anything unless you do it. But yeah, and then a teaching job opened up in Youngstown, Ohio. The school was Schaffen Career and Technical Center. And so this was the Career Center for Youngstown City Schools. And it was unique because most career centers, there's one per county. But Schaffen was created during segregation uh, to have a specific um, career center just for the underprivileged population, and it was great to
Wow.
work there. It really was, and I learned from a lot of great vet teachers. They took me under their wings, and lots of people in the community call it chauffin, and it really irks me to this day when I hear it, even in a commercial, because it was a person's name. It was their last name, Chaffin. Uh, so it's important to say it correctly. But yeah, I taught there for 10 years, and during that time is when I met you. We did our master's degree together at Kent State University, and we were what was considered to be Route B teachers. So, Route A is, you're in college for your undergrad, and then you have to do your student teaching. It's the normal way. Route B teachers is we have a specific trade or skill set, and that knowledge is what we teach. And you had to have that knowledge in order to qualify for the position. But there was a catch. The catch was you had to go back and get your teaching certificate. And that's where we met.
We did.
Yeah.
Two video guys finding each other in the back of the classroom going, "What are you in for?"
It's pretty much it. Who else was in there? Brian Odell. You remember Brian?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So Brian is how I got that job. Well, the interview. Brian taught at this high school that I graduated from, Halland High School here in Warren, Ohio. And after I graduated, I saw a bunch of stuff in the newspaper. I was still, the principal lived a few streets away from my parents. And that film I was telling you about, there was an article in the paper. Hey, local, filmmaker, this or that. Well, they saw it, and they had me come in and talk to the class. And I met Brian, and he was telling me, hey, you know, there's a lot of career centers or high schools that have career programs that are trying to start this new multimedia class. And he let me know about the Youngstown City job, and I found the posting and I applied. And I'm going to be honest, I only anticipated that I would work there 2 years, three tops, with one goal. The goal is I want to get into education. I wanted to start my own program, and eventually I wanted to be a faculty member at a university. That was my goal, and I made that goal when I was 22, sitting in the back of a senior level class, because I knew that my father was working 60 to 70 hours a week, just so that he could help me get my education. And I thought to myself, all right, I'm going into video production. I'm not going to make a ton of money, probably. I'm going to make enough to have a good life. But if I have kids, I'm probably not going to have the opportunity my dad did, just to keep punching overtime, you know, stay at the same shift, make time and a half. Those kinds of jobs, they're really not there anymore. And knowing that tuition benefit was there for faculty and staff as an employee, it was a big selling point, and it's something that I chose way back when.
So we're talking career tech ed. It
Yeah,
wasn't. It was. It's had many variations throughout the years. What was the most rewarding thing about teaching, and what was the most difficult thing for you teaching?
sure. The most rewarding thing in my teaching career was when I started to get some alums of the program, and they went out and they got jobs in the industry that I taught them. Those success stories are what kept me going. I tell everybody, if you're going to take risks, do it while you're young, because as soon as you get a full time gig that gives you a little bit of cushion, you get a little bit soft and life happens. And that's what happened. I met my wife, and before I knew it, we were starting a life together. And then it got harder to get out of teaching. Not that I wanted to get out, but again, the goal was 2, 3 years, but I was enjoying it so much. It was so rewarding to watch these students take these skills, because it's not, I'm not downplaying regular academics. Okay. But there is just something about the way that our career tech programs are built. They're built with about 45 minutes related, and the rest of your, hour and a half, 2 hour block. That's where the money happens, because that's where you're teaching them those hands on skills. And it is how the health industry works. And a lot of career tech programs and career tech schools modeled a lot of it after that, and it was great. That was the most rewarding thing. I have students that work at Fox 8 News, or I had students that won art awards. I teach video, but they learn Photoshop from me because we were creating graphics. And I had a student win a Heinz ketchup design contest as a national contest. You know,
Nice.
we got to go to the state house, and she got an award and everything. So those moments are the most rewarding, and my fellow teachers, they were like family. It's the cool thing about that job was every single person that worked there had a completely different trade. So you knew plumbers, electricians, masons, and then there's me. I'm in like this IT field. That's what they viewed it as. Oh, well, he teaches video multimedia. He must know a lot about technology. Um, but we could all kind of help each other's families with the services that we knew. So, I remember having um, the first shed that I had built when my wife Chris and I bought our first house was my buddy Kevin. He was the construction teacher, and he came over on a Saturday and helped build this shed. You know, and I remember going over people's houses and setting up, wireless networks, and taking pictures or doing wedding videos or whatever. But it was a cool thing. It was a cool thing. What was the most? What was the hardest thing about teaching? Um, Teaching in the beginning, like the first 5 years, was pure teaching. My last 5 years, a lot of things changed in the state, and I ended up doing more paperwork to prove that I was teaching than I was actually teaching. And that part was, it's necessary as a teacher, to have documentation, to have a curriculum, and to follow it. I understand all that, but again, like, we're teaching skills. Like, the skills I was teaching, it wasn't changing, but all the work that I had to prove that I was teaching those skills changed. And then, teaching in Youngstown City, there was a few tragedies that had happened in my 10 years. And I had a great student. Um, you know, love that kid. He ended up getting murdered. It's still an unsolved case to this day. Complete nonsense, wrong place, wrong time. Beautiful soul. Um, I don't know. I kind of didn't come back from that one. That one was hard. I'm still not over it. But that was one of the things that kind of hedged me towards getting out of teaching. Um, but the beautiful thing about while I was teaching was I was working in the industry the entire time. So I didn't just quit video production. I was still making films, and I was working for then the Cleveland Indians, kind of like working my way through the ranks, just like I did at Teleproductions and TV2, starting out as a field producer, doing some audio, and then being able to get my shot at being a technical director there. But yeah, it was a great 10 years. It was a great 10 years.
I I feel for you, brother. I'm so sorry. It is. Um, I've had students get thrown out of the house. I had one of my best students of all time. Could have gone off and done it. He was doing it at that level in the program, and he was being groomed for the family business. And
Mm.
and it was just heartbreaking to uh, to just sort of see that potential. Uh, he's married, got kids now, and perfectly fine. Uh, and every once in a while, when I have contact with him, I go, "You making company videos?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I'm sorry, brother.
That's
Um,
okay. You know, it happens.
so that as you ease out of education,
Mhm.
you had been laying the groundwork for making a transition back to the industry. How did that happen next?
So, I what ended up happening my wife was pregnant with our twins, and some things were happening in the district. Like I said, like that tragedy happens. I don't know. You just start taking a close look in the mirror. Is what I'm doing every day what I set out to do? And the answer was no. The answer was I set out to do 2 to 3 years. I'm on year 10. I could easily see myself being here another 10 and watching kind of the rest of my life right there not go as I kind of wanted it to. So I took a leap of faith. I took the exact same leap of faith that I took on my education, just getting out of teaching. So, taking out all those student loans to get my undergraduate, um, that leap of faith there, I believed in myself. I believed in my skill set. And I took that same, all the skills that I had learned and that I had been teaching, and I decided to just go get paid for it and not teach. So the next couple of years, mainly just all sports production. And again, that doesn't happen unless I was a student at Kent State, and the reason is my senior year at Kent State um, kind of caught lightning on a bottle with the basketball teams. Um, there's a group of us that went to the staff members at Teleproductions and said, "Hey, we know you've let students in the past do a hockey game or a baseball game or a basketball game, and in the past, is there any way we can do a basketball game or two?" And they said, "Yeah, sure, we'll try it out." They didn't think it was going to be a thing, and we ended up directing over, or I ended up being directing over 22 men's and women's basketball games. 2002 was the year that Kent State went to the Elite Eight. This is the year that you know everything that the foundation of Kent State's basketball program, created by Gary Waters. This is where it came to fruition, and it was a great ride. And the funniest thing about it is everyone always asks me, "What was it like going to all those games?" And that's when I knew that I loved working in sports production, because I didn't go as a fan. I was in the corner of the Mac Center with a little remote box with a slide out switcher, and I had an audio operator next to me. We had, what do we have? One, two, three, four camera operators. Yes, so you had game, two baseline, and a tight follow, and everything else was fiber back to the studio in music and speech. They overlaid all the graphics. They did the score bug. They ran all the commercials. So there was a director there as well. They did pregame, postgame, and halftime shows. So, there's a group of, I would say, I don't know, 15, 20 students that got the experience of a lifetime, and that really laid the foundation for me to get into sports production. And that's when I was hired at um, Cleveland Indians. I think that was like 2008. So I was a few years into teaching, and at that time, I mean, I'm working 75 games a year while teaching. It was a lot, but you're young and you can run on like not a lot of sleep. But when I got out of teaching, then I just worked games. It didn't matter if it was high school football, high school basketball, um, you know, Major League Baseball, and then I also got into the Canton Charge. So at that time, the Canton Charge, well, the NBA, we were subcontractors through the NBA, and my job was the instant replay operator. And the main reason why they added that crew position was to help train NBA referees. So, like that's when they go to the table.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's like a dual job. You're running replays for the stream or broadcast. But then if a ref goes and says, hey, we need to see this time to see if it's a 3-pointer, we'd re rack everything and show it to them from every angle we had in a slow motion just so that they could make the call. So, it was a cool gig.
And that was the Civic Center in
Yep.
Canton.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
man.
So again, I live in Warren, Ohio. It's not too far away from Canton and
Yeah.
Cleveland and Akron. And I went all over Northeast Ohio doing sports production.
You were driving right past my house.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so education to industry,
Hmm.
transition back to education, right?
Yeah, I did. I did. Before that, while I was teaching, I did a feature length documentary. So yes, it's kind of an important part of my journey because it shows the diversity of cameras and equipment that you need to know to be able to do things like this.
Single
You know,
camera versus live multi.
right, right, and you're having to set up your own lights versus being in an arena and it's already lit. You got to be able to set up and record clean audio. Um, and on that feature film, the director's name was Eric Murphy. We met up again when I was doing that film I was telling you about. Names in the paper. It led to the teaching job, and it led to my first short film, which was his graduate thesis film. And probably about 2 years after that, he got a hold of me and he's like, "Hey, I want to do a documentary on Jim Trafficant." And for those of you that don't know who Jim Trafficant is, Jim Trafficant used to be uh, our congressman here in the Mahoning County, and well, I'm in Trumbull County, but he was probably one of the most bombastic, in your face politicians, and this is all pre politics of today, because now there's a lot of characters, but everyone was really straight laced during the trafficking era, and it was him. He stuck out like a sore thumb because he wore bell bottoms and his hair. I mean, it looked like
Wild
you know
hair.
wild hair. It looked like he
Yep.
got cut with a weed whacker. Um, but we so I shot and lit over 20 interviews in probably about a 3-4 year span. So again, times were way different during then. HD had just started, so now you're teaching yourself a completely different skill set because you go from mini DV tape and now you're not on tape anymore. You're on SD cards.
I was just going to say, you were file based for that?
Yeah, we were file based, and Google Drive is really what we used. So Eric was living in Los Angeles. He's a writer producer. Just look up Ancient Aliens. I mean, he's done almost the entire series. He's really talented at what he does. But he wanted to do something about home, and so he flew home a couple of times, and we spent months filming. When Jim Trafficant got out of jail, we followed him from when he got out of jail and on the campaign trail, because he ran again when he got out, and we went to every single event. And then we thought we were done with that, like the film was wrapping up, and then unfortunately, Jim Trafficant had that horrific accident on his farm where his tractor flipped and crushed him. I was, It was awful. What an awful way for any human being to go out. But we had to reopen the edit and do more interviews, just because we couldn't leave it out.
And do like an epilogue.
Yeah, we had to, like, how do you do a documentary on somebody, um, and release it without that portion of it?
Yeah.
So that extended it. I mean, this is a 7-year passion project. Um, like I said, the media was different than I went to school for. When I started that film, I'm cinematographer, I'm the lighter, I'm the audio guy, and it's me and him. We're just going to people's houses or places of work and showing up and doing what we do, walking through a space, get the right angle, close your eyes, listen, what needs turned off, all the things that you need to figure out how to do, to light an interview correctly.
Record a couple of minutes of room sound for the edit.
Yeah. Gotta have that wild track, man. Gotta have it.
Okay. So how long was that period?
That was a 7-year period while I was teaching. So it started almost at the same time I started, in Major League Baseball. And it was 2015 is when it played at the Cleveland International Film Festival.
So how did the transition, you were like Mr. Transition.
Yeah.
How did the transition back to the mothership of Kent State come about?
Oh, wow. Well, I had a few stops in between that and Kent State. I worked at an advertising agency in Youngstown, Ohio for a few years. Um, and the reason why I wanted to dip my toes into that is I had done so much in secondary education, higher education. Even while I was teaching, I got hired in as like an associate producer on their Emmy nominated show, Homework Express, working with their students, which ended up being a lot of my students that had graduated and just went across the street to Youngstown State. I remember Dr. Owens, he's head of the program. I was second year teaching, and they started asking us, hey, we need to start building these pathways, so high school students can get college credit. So I set up this big meeting at Youngstown State, and I'm sitting there, and there's all these tenure professors. Dr. Owens walks in, he's got his hat on, takes it off, he like looks at me, and he's like, so you want us to give free college credit to your students, and who are you? And that's the truth. I was like 25, like I get it from their perspective now. I completely understand how ridiculous it sounded. But fast forward 2 more years, then they're calling me because they have my students now. And they're like, hey, these students know what they're talking about because I instilled that work ethic in them. I gave them the soft skills, like the hard skills, everything. And that's when that connection happened, for me to go and work with them. But I wanted to do the advertising agency just because, I wanted some business to business experience. So I did web design, logo design, um, print layout, and video production. And I didn't go to school for any of those other software programs, but as a lifelong learner, you just keep teaching yourself. So I've taught myself a lot of those things. And then I worked at Hiram College for almost 3 years. And at Hiram, I was working with the alumni department, and they had a 24-hour day of giving. And, I pitched them on some ideas to do some giving videos to try to help drive some social media donations. And those videos are the reason why I got my job at Kent State. I saw the posting. It and I work in the philanthropy and alumni engagement division at Kent State University. So it's in a building that wasn't there when we were there. It's the one on the corner of Lincoln and Summit. That's pretty funny. And now, the rewarding part about that job is we get to help raise scholarship money for students to be able to get an education at our alma mater. We get to help raise money for capital projects like the new Crawford Hall for the business school. I mean, that is changing the landscape of Maine and Midway. Like the airport changed recently. FedEx was a huge sponsor. Um, the engineering school, so I was going to say aeronautics and engineering, they outgrew their building and they had to put on and expand. So, we're part of those projects, and then we're part of the alumni engagement. So, getting people involved in homecoming. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, so the official title is.
Oh, I'm the Senior Associate Director for Video and Digital Outreach in the Communications Department in the Division of Philanthropy and Alumni Engagement. It's a mouthful.
So here's the point I want to kind of tie together is at every stop, as you transitioned back industry and back sometimes duality of industry and teaching and education, the ad gig, all of that. When you look back, you say, I now am most effective at my current job because of 2, 3, 4, half a dozen stops doing different aspects of it.
Yeah, doing different aspects for sure. And, again, to be in the video production industry, whether it's live event production or corporate video or filmmaking and cinematography, you consistently have to teach yourself the new technology every year, the new software. And in my new position, I started 5.5 years ago. We started getting into a different way of filming and a different way of editing. So you start out learning, ENG cameras. They've got lenses on a bayonet, and they've got their 3 rings, and you can actually get a nice soft background and all that great stuff. But when you get into the prosumer cameras, everything's flat. So a lot of the stuff's flat, and you've got to achieve that nice, sweet, soft background by moving your camera back and lighting techniques. Get away from the background, get away from the subject. So that's kind of how you cheat it in that realm. But then all of a sudden, that Canon GL2 that I bought when I graduated college, which cost me $3,000, now you can get almost a Sony FX3, which is your little compact cinema camera with an interchangeable lens system, and that camera alone will change the entire quality of your productions. So now we're filming in log profiles and editing in log. So, when you watch films, you'd always hear about a film colorist. That's a big time job. But now it's kind of reached all the way to anywhere in the world. Anybody can now, with this technology being so much more affordable, you can shoot in that format, which gives you the most dynamic range. And then when you start editing in it, I mean, the colors that you can achieve are far greater than anything that your camera can actually shoot in camera. So again, you just keep teaching yourself that stuff. And the content that we create at Kent State University in my division, it's all omni-channel. So it's fundraising for the most part, but also alumni engagement. So what I mean by omni-channel is I work on a communications team that is built much like the agency that I worked at in Youngstown, where there's project managers or account managers. They help write and push the project flow, and then there's a creative team. So we now have expanded. We have 2 in-house designers. We have 3 in-house people on our digital team, which handles all of our email correspondence, websites, um, text campaigns, and they just started using Slate for kind of all of our internal stuff, which is an amazing program. And then there's the video team. So now there's 2 of us. When I started, it was just me. And you name, like, you were counting stops along my career. The one thing that we didn't say is almost at every stop, I was a one-man band unless I was working on a live sports production. So again, you had to know it all. You had to know how to shoot, light, edit, record clean audio. You had to know it all. And being able to know it all is kind of how each job led into the next.
Technical and production,
Yeah.
which
Yep.
is essentially what you're doing now, aren't you?
Yes.
What's in your kit now? What what
What
what do you
cameras?
yeah, because we got God only knows what the video cameras were, right? At the time.
Right.
Then GL2 and all of that progression, high 8, DV
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. And now we're pulling out SD cards and dropping those log files into, or you're probably dropping them on drives and pulling them off drives.
Mm.
So, the workflows have we're not digitizing anything anymore.
Mm-mm. The workflow's definitely changed.
Yeah.
Camera wise in the kit, our workhorse camera right now is Sony FX6. Love this camera. It's amazing. And you know what? I've kind of ran the gamut on, I started with Canon. I still use Canon for still photography. Um, I went into Panasonic, lots of Panasonics. Panasonic GH5 kind of really changed everything for a lot of people. But then once this Sony Cinema line came out, wow, wow,
Yeah.
it's amazing. So we have an FX6, we have an A7. So was it A7S3 as our B cam? I still have a couple of my Panasonics. EVA1 is the second workhorse camera, and the difference between these workhorse, what I call a workhorse camera, and what I'm calling my B cameras. So when we do our interviews, we do 2 cams. Our A cameras are the ones that have professional audio built into it. It's got ND filters. It has everything in the camera. That way we don't have to like add all these additions to it. Where these B cameras, they can do all the things the A cameras can, but you got to accessorize them out. You got to build a rig, and you know, I'd much rather not have to have all the audio hookups to it and just run that as a straight B camera. And those cameras, I can't believe I'm going to say this on your podcast, but autofocus was a very dirty word back in the day. I remember like you'd laugh people out of classes like, what do you mean autofocus? Nobody uses that. Everybody uses manual focus. Well, that's another thing that these newer mirrorless full frame cameras have, just the AI in them has completely changed the game, whether it's still photos or video, where you can put it in autofocus and this stuff, it does not lose focus. It's amazing. It's amazing.
On 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 the photo side, uh, I bought um, I bought a Canon 1D Mark IV, which was a high end 2014, 2015, and it had a pretty significant autofocus, but it didn't have tracking.
Mm,
Where the AI comes in is the tracking.
yeah.
And 2 or 3 years ago, I bought the Canon R6, and I remember tweaking out the settings and taking it out to my first sporting event, and I literally, it's like you shoot something, you look at it, and you just look at the camera and go, "What? This
Mm,
box?" I'm a back button focus guy, and I press and hold
mhm,
that button, and it locks on the eye, and because in the DSLR you would get it, but then you would have to reframe because it was center
Mhm.
point.
Mhm.
And now this box is tracking, you
Yeah.
know, it is. I had to get over the sense that I was cheating somehow.
Well, that's what I meant by a dirty word. That's same thing. I definitely felt like it was cheating in the beginning, but at this point, it's another tool for you to use. And if you're
Yeah.
not using it, you're not. It's not wise because these interchangeable lens, like cinema cameras, some of them, they're really hard to keep the focus. It's not like it's got a power zoom built into it. Those are the cameras we were used to using. You had zoom throttles, focus rings, and it it was so natural. You didn't even think about it. You just knew which way to rack everything as the motion was happening in front of you. And then you get into these kind of cameras, and it's you know you got your hand on that lens, and you're like, wait a second, like it's not as smooth. You can't move that ring as smooth as you could practice it as much as you want. It's just
It's not
not
going to
as
work that
smooth.
way.
Where now, if you're using that AI, wow.
So it sounds like a pretty big team.
Yeah, it is a pretty big team. It's grown. Um, and again, like omni-channel means we're starting with a print design, and then we are taking that print design and um, making it go into everything else. They'll create email templates and for video and social media. So I have a lot of cool graphics that go into a lot of my videos at Kent State. I can honestly say I'm not making any of the graphics anymore. Before, at Hiram and every other stop I was at, I was making all my graphics. But our designers are so talented that they just consistently, like, we want to keep that consistent look through everything. So they give me the graphics, and they're normally Illustrator files. So I'm animating Illustrator files in After Effects. Um,
Because they're
again,
frames. They're a
yeah,
series of frames.
series of frames. And designers, they they lay things out a little bit different than animators. So in Illustrator, everything kind of comes out as one flat file. All the layers are built into one, like they're not separated. But so as animators, that's one of the first things that we have to do is we have to look at this artwork, and we have to think about, what do I want to move and how do I want to move it, and then how do I layer it out so that each item is on its own layer, and it is you can actually animate it. So yeah.
All right, Teach. Do you have? You said you have one other person. Is that a full time person or is that a student?
Yeah, so I did first couple of years I had student workers. We would they would apply online. I forget what it was called, Handworks maybe. I think that was the program. We'd post the job. It was like an internal thing for all the students. Whoever would apply, I would ask them to supply demo reels, bring them in for interviews. I'd interview them, get to know them a little bit. So I had two student workers in about 3 years. And then the demand for video was so high that we recently, um, the guy that's on the team, he had his 1 year anniversary on March 6th. So we hired him. I'm hoping that the demand for video continues. It seems like it will. And then there will be an opportunity for other students. But the one cool thing that we do, and this is something that I just wanted to do myself, was to be able to work with students and teleproductions. Is for the last 3 years, we've streamed our homecoming parade. So I would work with New Student Media, and I was able to hire three students to be talent. So two that would sit at a table and, be our host and co host, and then one that would, um, the last 2 years, we were able to put one with an RF, and the students riding on a float, like interviewing people. Um, we hired teleproductions. We got to use their truck that you're familiar with. the last 2 years and use one of their directors, but then an entirely student run production from there. So it was myself and a director sitting in the truck. I'd kind of be quasi EP, and I would create tons of content for it, whether it's pre-made spots or if I know we're doing something for global education, I would, um, I've been blessed enough to have Kent State send me to Florence, Italy twice to cover some amazing events that happened over there with our donors. And we had a global education focus and, created some short videos and then some long form videos to celebrate our 50 years of studying abroad in Florence. So that was part of that homecoming stream. And I'm proud to say that we won our first award for that stream this past year. It was an educational advertising award. I know it's not an Emmy, um, but still, I mean, to be recognized again in a different capacity, not as a shooter or editor, but as an executive producer. And then I'm most proud of the students, just because, I mean, to be able to do what they do and get that experience. That's why I want to continue to do this stream for homecoming. Is it's not a typical experience. It's not a basketball game. It's not a play for the theater. It's not a fashion show. It's literally a live moving train that once the parade starts, it doesn't end until the last float goes through. So it's a lot of fun.
What is the most rewarding thing? You were be more specific. What's the most rewarding thing now after that journey? Now you are still part teacher, still part production pro. What's the most important or most rewarding thing about your job now at your alma mater?
Sure. The most rewarding thing is being able to meet these students and to tell their stories to help raise more money for scholarships. Because higher education it's not cheap, and the more money we can raise to help them get a higher education to be a better part of our society. I mean, it changes communities 1 degree at a time, and I'm heavily focused on higher ed, and I love being a part of giving back at Kent State University, and and that could be monetarily with my time, um, teaching students that I work with my craft. But yeah, there's a lot of rewarding things, but being a part of the beautification of campus and helping students achieve their dreams, it's a great feeling on a daily basis.
Yeah, man. All right. Last question.
Mm-hmm.
You're unique as a guest because you have interviewed young aspiring media professionals, production professionals. So I'm going to ask you the same question that I ask all of my guests, and that is, what 3 things would you tell an aspiring media production pro that they should have before they go in and interview with Mr. Alberini?
I've been called Mr. Alberini since I was a teacher. That's funny to hear. Um, Top 3 things. I would say you got to do your research on the position and the organization. And then from that research, you're going to build a demo reel that is custom to that job description. Um, Unfortunately, in our industry, you can't just say you know how to do it. You got to show us you know how to do it. So a demo reel is key. A good demo reel, and I'm still a firm believer in a good cover letter, even though a lot of people don't believe that that weighs as much. But I read every single cover letter. You can tell when they're cookie cutter, and you can tell when they've been customized to the position, and if they've done some research. And then when you see their work, Uh, I'm constantly trying to like look and see how does their work that they're showing me translate to this position. Um, you know, I I think the second thing would be um, I want to see the passion that you have for this industry, um, based on how you communicate to me in an interview, why you want this job and why you want to work in this industry. Um, and then I would say the last thing is knowing that you're not going to know everything, and nobody does. I don't know everything, and I'm 20 plus years into this career. The thing that you have to prove in an interview is that you're willing to learn and you're willing to adapt, because technology and software will continually change. But if you have a strong foundation through education, you can continue to achieve everything that you want in this production world.
That's my brother teacher, man.
Yeah, man. I tell you what we do. I know I'm not currently a teacher, but what we do, it's very technical, but at the same time, you've got to be able to communicate what you're doing and when. And I think that's another part of live production that not a lot of people talk about is listening skills are just as important as being able to speak and write. Um, and I think that's a key in an interview too. Sometimes it's okay to take a breath. Sometimes it's okay to pause before you give an answer, because it's showing me that you're actually thinking and you care about what you're about to say versus I'm just going to spit out what I rehearsed.
Fellow Kent State grad Jeff Alberini, I can't thank you enough for being a part of the project.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate you having me on. It was great catching up with you. And I hope that, some aspiring filmmakers and video creators see this and for how great it is. And, hopefully they can walk away with a couple of nuggets of information that maybe they didn't know before. Go Kent State, go Flashes.
Thanks again to the multi-talented Jeff Alberini, Senior Associate Director of Video and Digital Outreach at Kent State University. The Zoom with Our Feet podcast is a production of TV Commando Media. The ZoomPod theme is by Novembers and their funky groove, Cloud 10. Until next time, creators, be ready to accept the challenge.